Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
The war to end all wars lasted through June of 1945. These are the personal stories of James and Harriet White, as recalled by them nearly 50 years later. Veterans Day, November 11, 1994.
They were shooting at airplanes.
How do you train to shoot at an airplane?
50 caliber machine gun. You're on the ground and you get the gun. And the plane is going along, pulling this target. You're shooting at the target.
What if you miss the target and hit the plane?
Yeah, many a time they did that.
Are they real planes?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
How did they get someone to fly that plane?
The Air Force. You're next. Get going. After I passed the test for the 50 caliber machine gun, I thought I was going to be a machine gunner. Get back to camp. The captain says, 5:30 tomorrow morning outside the CQ office. You going to Cooks and Baker School? I said, Captain, I said, I just passed the test for a 50 caliber machine gun. He looked at me, he says, White, you're in the Army.
She wasn't born before Pearl Harbor, she was born afterwards.
The whole thing
So
was
you weren't considered a father. They didn't want fathers in the service because they thought, well, they'll be worrying about home and family and everything.
They were too damn old anyway.
And then there were, most of them, with those days they didn't become fathers at 15, 16 like the girls and boys today, you know.
One, lift your head up, two, throw your
Well, we have to do,
take your chest out, four, let me
what was
hear
it, 25? Full field pack, hike. That was to prove whether or not you were able to go overseas. Well, Moon wanted to go. He wanted to go overseas. But he
The rest
says,
of you guys.
I know I can't make it. He says, my feet won't let me do it. We said, don't worry about it, Moon. We'll get you in the back of the outfit where no one's going to see you. And we'll take care of it. Well, we worked him backwards. And after, 5 miles or so, I took his rifle, put it over my other shoulder, and about a mile later, somebody took his pack and put it on their back, and one thing and another, until he got down to just what he would wear, you know? About a mile before we got back to camp, the first sergeant stopped the march, and he came back. And we said, oh boy, now we're in trouble. He just looked at us, he smiled, and he said, fellas, he said, I know what you've done. He said, I'm not going to crucify any of you. He said, my intentions were to get Moon somehow through it so he could go overseas with us. But he says, I knew last night that you fellas had something planned. And he says, I didn't want to interfere. Well, and so he says, I'm glad everything's turned out all right. And he says, I've got the ambulance notified to be at the entrance of the gate when we get there. And he said, they'll take Moon right to the hospital.
The 557th landed in Scotland on July 12, 1944. From there, they were shipped to France in August to take part in the siege of a German submarine base in Brest. Their battalion boasted the latest model of self-propelled 155mm guns, long toms on Sherman tank chassis.
Well, our main purpose was support artillery. When the infantry got to a certain point, then we would open up our guns. So we were shooting over the heads of the other outfits in between us and the infantry. We had broken the ground for them to advance. Well, Brest was a submarine base. The submarines used to come in, refuel, and they needed ammunition. They got it there, went back out to sea again. Well, that was the one place that they really wanted to get, because it was interfering with the ships going up the English Channel and so forth. So I think they gave us approximately a week to get it out. So we did everything we could to get them to fire a gun, but they wouldn't fire one. We didn't want to be the first ones to fire. But the day that they gave up, the night before, no, 2 nights before that, I had gone on special detail, and I was up on the roof of one of the buildings, and it was a roof like that. No place to really be, because you had no protection. Stayed on the roof all night long, and temperatures around, oh, I don't know, 30, 35 degrees. It was cold, and next morning after I got off, I'm back, and the other guys who were on other buildings, they made their reports and I made mine. And the captain got together with the gun crews and says, we're going in there. Now here's what I want you to do. Every entrance to that fortress, you might say, had a steel door. And the door was at least 6 inches thick. All they did was just take one of our tanks, got it set, brought the gun down, loaded it, and aimed it right for the door. Well, you take, let's see, 12 guns like we had. One aims at every damn door. You're either going to give up or you're going to get blown to hell. That was the ultimate order. So finally, after 3 or 4 hours of waiting, the door opened and and the white flag flying. So this German general comes out, General Gerhard, and in perfect English, we surrender. Don't hurt my men. In perfect English. They were well educated.
Oh, yeah.
We never fired a shot. And we were mad about that. Just like he made all those emails for the different guys, and it didn't cost us anything for the V-mail paper or to send them. That was for nothing.
But I got a good 8 by 10 or something like that picture of Dad's face, so that she would thought maybe, well, she might recognize him. And so every night, you know, when he wasn't home, so when we were all alone, I would have her kiss his picture goodnight so she'd know her daddy. And then when he come home on furlough, she didn't want anything to do with him, and we were doing fine, the two of us alone, and she wouldn't let him help me. In those days you had to bring oil up for your stove and from the cellar and everything, and she wouldn't let him help me at all. She wouldn't let him carry her down the stairs or anything. And then the only time she'd go near him was when he took his uniform jacket and hat off. Then she'd sit on his lap, and at night I'd say, well, kiss Daddy goodnight. She'd hop down off his lap and go in and kiss the picture goodnight, because she didn't know Daddy other than the picture.
The battalion moved into Germany in the latter part of October of '44, continuing their harassing and interdiction fire in support of the infantry.
Now the guys went out and they got decorations from the different houses where they could find stuff. And they got a tree from up in here somewhere, brought it down, got it set up, and possibly 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon doing this. You're not thinking of the darkness. You're just thinking of the Christmas tree. So we found candles. We put candles on the tree. Came 9 o'clock at night, decided we're going to light the candles. We did. 10 o'clock comes, and Bed Check Charlie comes. Well, he made his first sweep around, and he made his second one, and he made his third one. And I'm telling you, this is the truth. There must have been 15 or 20 of us there. Not one of us moved from where we were, because we were watching him and watching the tree at the same time and talking about Christmas and so forth. And all of a sudden, boop, 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 boop. Look up, there's the traces coming out from the machine gun on the plane. You could watch them come right down, and you pick those candles right off. Snap the light, the flames right off. You know, we had all the turkeys cut up, and the vegetables all ready. This was Christmas Day. And we told the guys to go in the different houses, places bombed out, and get themselves a regular plate and silverware, rather than use their canteens for Christmas dinner. Oh, they thought that was a good idea. Well, they did. Well, they're all lined up, ready to start getting the chow. Charlie comes over. We watched him. He made his 2 turns. Then he made his 3rd one. Then he came down. We watched those traces come out. Right in the pan, cut up to a bone. 10 minutes later, march order. This plane, German plane, was shot down by one of our guys, Mr. Keller machine gun. And when the flames of that plane, the remnants, just about disappeared, this guy decides he's going out, and he's going to take the watch off the guy's wrist. The colonel's standing there, and he says, "You take one step towards that plane, and you'll get it right between the eyes." Because he said, what is left for that pilot goes down with him. And we live in the cellar of this bombed out house. Oh, the cellar was dry, so we figured, oh, fine. So there was five of us in there. We went to bed. Everything's nice and quiet. Sometime after midnight, you could hear psst, psst, psst. We knew there were 88s coming in. And we knew they were hitting the ground outside. But we didn't know exactly where. Well, the next morning, when we dared to go out, we saw them. It was still sticking in the muck, like that. If one of those had hit the building, we'd have gone to smithereens, because they had cement fuses on them. So our captain called the engineers. They sent a crew down, and they had long rubber boots on, hip boots, because once they hit that muck, their legs went right down just like that. And they told us, and we were damn lucky, because the shells couldn't go off in the muck. They had to hit something solid. The foundation of the house we were in, that's all they needed. He was a reporter for the Boston Globe.
She had demo. She didn't need
And he was in Europe. He found out about our outfit
Get me a TV.
being 75% New England. So he got his passes and he came down to saw us. And he took most everybody from Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut. She used to start on the radio about 8 o'clock at night. And, you poor GIs. You don't know what's happening back home. And going on and on and on. And she'd go all night long right there. It came floating across the Rhine with a note on it. And the note says, "Hi, how are you, Yanks? You getting enough to eat?" So one guy thought of it, oh, let's send them a note back. I wrote a note, "Thank you. No, we're not getting enough meat." We put it in, let's go floating across the river. A few hours later, there's a half a side of beef comes crossing the river. Where they found the cow to kill, I don't know, but they found it. You know, we were baking the cake in the ovens in the truck. We got on the other bank of the Rhine River, opened up the oven doors, pulled the sheet pans out. Oh, the cake is beautiful. One end is like that, the other end is like that.
But they didn't mind. They ate it with a spoon.
Waves will do that to you, yeah.
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 So if your oven and your stove isn't lovable, forget it.
Through April of 45, the battalion moved rapidly westward as part of the Allied forces' relentless spearheading movement to push the Germans back to the Elbe River and the waiting Russian army.
Aber wir werden auch die nicht vergessen, die den richtigen Weg einschlagen.
By early May, with nowhere left to run, the Germans surrendered unconditionally to the Allied powers. The 557th Battalion awaited further orders, resting at local hotels, guest houses, and even a castle.
There was a prince and princess lived there. But when the war broke out, they went somewhere else. They left Germany. So the American government took over. When we get to that part of Germany, it's quite a castle. I didn't see the whole thing inside. It would have taken you a week, I think. It was an enormous place. And outside there was that moat where you had to cross before you can get into the castle itself. I've seen them in pictures, but I never expected to see one, a real one.
The time had finally come to report back to base for reassignment.
You notice it was posted on the bulletin board.
Japan.
Our outfit was to leave San Francisco, and 57 days later arrive at Honshu, Japan, with better than an 80% casualty rate.
As fate would have it, the battalion never had to leave for the Pacific Theater, as news reached home that the war was over.
Well, my opinion of the whole thing was, and still is today, there was no damn reason for it. Because the Germans didn't want war, and the Japs didn't want war. They were only doing what they were told to do. There were days that were very comfortable. But those few days were overrun by the ones that were held. And there was many of those. You just say, that's a few years gone. You never forget. You want to, but you don't.